Okay, Year 12s, I am sure you're in full revision mode anyway, but if not, why not? Obviously. But you are obviously all revised now, I know you are. So what I'm going to do is just give you some reminders of revision techniques and some tips for the upcoming assessment, which has been written and has been handed in. It is a difficult assessment, so revising is paramount, but if you've been doing the right thing, you will be fine, okay? And these tips will hopefully help you as well. Okay. So the point is we are trying to get stuff from your working memory into your long-term memory. So when you see an exam question, you go bing, there's the answer, and it's in your head. This is specifically important when we're trying to recall facts about whatever topic we are asking about. So you need to proactively do something to get it into your long-term memory. It just doesn't happen just because you rock up to my lessons. It happens only through lots of practice. Okay, so our working memory is rubbish, and you have to remember that. So as soon as you've read something, you most likely have forgotten it unless you do something with that information. Okay, that is key to revision. Okay, so every topic has got some stuff you need to learn, and I know I've done this with you before, but I think it's worth recapping. So let's say we looked at memory management. What do you need to know for memory management? And this becomes a really important question because if you don't know what you need to know, how do you know it? You know, I know that's a lot of you knows in one sentence, but ultimately, if you're not sure exactly what topics and what comes up in those topics, then there's absolutely no way you can actually tackle those questions in the exam. So knowing what you need to know for memory management is just as important as the knowledge itself. So organising your knowledge and your notes, and the two go hand in hand, by the way, is really important. So for memory management, you need to know its purpose. What is memory management? You need to know what paging is, segmentation, and also what virtual memory is. And that kind of is a tie-in with your knowledge on RAM as well as secondary storage, I guess. So chunking is really important. So once you've organized your notes and you know exactly what you need to know, some of that stuff you need to know is simple. Okay, it's kind of like one sentence, two sentences. Some of it's a bit more complicated. Excuse me. A bit more complicated, and as such requires a greater depth of understanding and will need chunking down even further. Okay, so however you decide to revise, so flashcards, mind maps, OneNotes, however you want to structure those notes, that chunked notes, do make sure that you have broken it down in that way, that you thought to yourself, okay, well, this topic is complicated like the FD cycle, well, I need to maybe break this down into 3 parts, 1 part for the double fetch, maybe 1 part for the normal FD cycle, 1 part for jumping. Okay, so the more complicated it is, the more you break it down into smaller, separate flashcards or separate sections in your notes. Okay, please don't overload a single flashcard or a single section of your notes with too much information because your brain can't cope with it. Okay, so massive tips when you are going through your notes and you're making flashcards, things like that. Don't use your paragraphs. Keep it short to the point. Now, short to the point is really important, especially when you are regurgitating this information for exam questions. Please don't waffle. Okay, you don't have to write full sentences unless it's the long answer questions. You can just write simple kind of bullet pointed statements. And if it's a describe question, have that bullet point statement and then expand on it with the information you need to. Okay, but keep it short. Okay, don't overload the information. Okay, don't cram too much. If you want to highlight, do highlight it. I know studies show that highlighting isn't effective, but it's not effective because people use it as the only way they do it. Highlighting actually can help certain keywords stand out when you are chunking information, so it can be useful. Also, and it's one thing I want you to do this week is, especially the more complicated topics, for example, the FD cycle, make sure what you've written down in your notes is correct. Okay, how do you do that? Well, notice that I have not written the PowerPoints or the book down. Check with your peers. You've got a lot of bright souls in both groups. Okay, please talk to them. Talk to each other. Ask each other, do you think this is okay? This is good or not? Okay, get their opinion. You can check with me. Obviously, I know time is short and it might be difficult to get hold of me. But if there's a topic you really are unsure about, now's the time to talk to me before the actual assessment. And also the mark schemes from Physics Maths Tutor. They have all the concrete, to the point, bullet points for every single question that you might get. Therefore, why not use that information and use it to help really focus your notes and to check the correctness. And if there's something in the mark scheme that's not in your notes, well, you know what to do, don't you? You can put it into your notes, and therefore you've got that to revise from. I know some of you will be a bit sad about saying this, but please do not use Google for any part of your notes ever. Okay, it is okay maybe to use a Google to check something quickly, but don't use it as the sole source of information for your notes, because what will happen is you'll do a Google about something you're not sure about, see something, you're still not sure about it, you've read something, feel like, oh, that must be correct then because it's in Google. Don't do that, please. Don't do that. It's stupid. Okay, use your class notes. If your class notes aren't detailed enough, use one more reputable sources, for example, the PowerPoints or Isaac Computing or the textbooks, or use your peers. Talk to someone is good at the topic. Have a conversation and say, okay, what do we need to know for, I don't know, CIR, for example. Okay, so please don't Google because you may not get the correct answer. Okay, use reputable sources for information. Yeah, I'm sure you're probably sick and tired of this slide by now, but please do Interleave. Please don't just revise the entirety of database normalization and then revise the entirety of, I don't know, reusable components, and then revise the entirety of floating points, and then never come back to database normalization, and never come back to whatever I say second, forget how. But you see my point, is that it's easy to forget stuff when you're talking about it. So Interleave your units, do database normalization more than once, maybe break it down into sections, maybe do first normal form, then do second normal form a few weeks later, a few days later, a few hours later, whatever happens to be. Okay, Interleave your revision, because that is the best way to make sure it sticks. You need to revise something more than once for it to stay in your long-term memory, especially the complicated topics. Notice I keep coming back to that term, complicated topics. Okay, these techniques are more effective on those topics than they are for the easy stuff. Okay, so please, if database normalization is stuff for you, or Carnot maps is stuff for you, or floating, whatever, okay, use these techniques for that. Now, I know time is short, but if you have got that hard topic that you're unsure about, now is a really good opportunity to make some quality notes on it and quality flashcards. On the screen, you can see some quality notes on paging and segmentation. You probably noticed I'm talking about paging and segmentation a lot. Oh, I wonder if it's coming up. Don't know. So those of you who are watching this video, you just had a tip of what's coming up on the assessment. Those of you not watching this video, haha. Anyway, notice I put keywords in there. Why do I put keywords in there? Well, in the assessment, the mark scheme, they have got those keywords in there, and you need to mention those keywords in order to get full marks. Okay, so think of it like a word cloud. If I'm answering the question, I'm going to be using those words to help me. Notice I've bullet pointed my my information, not a paragraph. There's very key things I can revise from, very key things I can learn from. Therefore, I know exactly what I need to know. Okay, it's a good way for helping you with your active recall. Related topics is useful because if you think, well, okay, well, what does this link in with? What other topics in computer science can it link to? Well, that might mean it's part of that question then. So for example, if I've got a question which includes paging segmentation, it might be part of a wider question talking about RAM, ROM and secondary storage. Okay, so they might interweave these different topics into one big long question, and they do, and that's what I have done in the assessment. So another big tip for those of you watching this video, you will have a question which darts around different related topics and not focusing on one thing at all. Okay, so especially for paging segmentation, hardware, things like that. So active recall is where we are trying to recall the information that we are revising. And one of the key things to do when you have got your flashcards created is to actually use them for the active recall. That's why these questions are useful. So if you've not got these questions on one side of your flashcard, you just literally on one side wrote, I know, memory management, actually cross that out and actually write these questions down. Okay, so write some questions on one side of your flashcards, or have on a separate section if you're using notes a set of questions for each topic. Okay, these can be based on exam questions, they can be based on active recall questions. It doesn't matter as long as you've got some key questions which allow you to recall all of the information that is in that section of your notes, flashcards, mind map, whatever. And then you can obviously see the flip side of your flashcards. If you've got a really detailed flashcard with all this information on, you can have one side over, okay, read the question, think about the answer, or write the answer down, whatever you wish to do, turn it over, check your answer. Okay, writing your answers down to the flashcards actually is a useful technique because it forces you to use these keywords rather than going, that was roughly right. Okay, if you are the sort of person who goes, yeah, that'll do, you're losing marks in the exam. Okay, why? Because detail. Okay, A-level is all about detail. That detail comes from the knowledge that you have to recall and also the keywords you have to use in your answer. The quality of your response is important. Therefore, when you are doing your flashcards, if you want to make sure, especially for those hard topics, make sure that you are 100% right and you're getting full marks. Write your answer down to those questions you're posing to yourself and actually check to see if you're using the right terminology, those right keywords. Okay, that actually makes a difference, ladies and gents. Okay, so now I've written the assessment, I can give you a bit more guidance on organising your notes, or what I'm really going to say is what topics are definitely something you want to consider looking at. So, obviously, all the stuff I've highlighted in yellow is definitely on the assessment. I mean, there's no surprises there. I am going to say that binary and hexadecimal are definitely coming up as well. Now, one of the reasons why I've included that is because they are a precursor to floating points, and it's important to have that prior knowledge in order to be able to access those later marks. Boolean algebra is coming up, ladies and gentlemen, so please do make sure you are revising Karnaugh maps. Okay, Karnaugh maps are important. The question I'm posing to you is tricky, okay, and it's tricky because it's wordy, but the actual Karnaugh map you end up producing is not that bad. Okay, so as long as you know how to fill out a Karnaugh map and how to read a Karnaugh map and how to create your groups from it, you will be fine. So again, the skills haven't changed even though the question is wordy. Okay, you want to make sure you're revising over operating systems. You want to make sure you're revising over compression algorithms, specifically run length encoding. Okay, although I'm not necessarily testing run length encoding directly, it is part of a question, and knowing a bit about it will really help you tackle the question. Some other things to point out. Stacks and queues are a big part of paper 2. Do make sure you're revising that one. Abstraction and decomposition form part of it. Maintainability and reusable components form part of the theory. They're not big sections, so just knowing the knowledge of that is enough, but they are there. And also, because I was a little bit worried about string manipulation, I have included a little bit of string manipulation as part of a question, not the whole focus of a question. Okay, so do make sure you're revising over how to use substrings. Okay, so hopefully that makes it nice and clear. Just another little point as well, hardware. You know, you can't really understand a lot of these topics without knowing hardware well. Am I going to ask you what the key input devices for a scenario is? No, I'm not. Okay, I probably won't, and you probably won't get that in real one either, because it's too easy. Sorry, but knowing RAM and ROM is important regardless of what you do. Okay, so just trying to think of anything else to mention. There is a long answer question. Also, you do need to know your database normalization. You have to be able to do that, explain the normal forms, and you do need to know about your moral side of it. I'm going to be nice and actually tell you it's moral, not legal. That does mean there's less to learn per se, but obviously you can give your own opinion on the moral side of things, thinking about things like privacy and whatnot. Okay, so moving on. So just a few more tips. Please do look at mark schemes and compare mark schemes to your notes, to your flashcards, to make sure you have included all the key points. I can't stress how important that is, because sometimes OCR throws curveballs. These are curveballs I cannot predict, and you know, I can't teach you everything or about computer science. Okay, so I will teach you all the core information you are expected as A-level students to read around the subject. Okay, if you don't do that, you know, you should, especially if you want an A or A star. So sometimes you'll get things in the mark schemes which I've not talked to you about, and that is because they are part of that wider reading aspect of the course. Okay, so summing up, there are things on the mark scheme that I have not talked to you about or taught you. Therefore, going through the mark schemes and comparing them to your notes is an absolute ideal way of making sure that wider reading is included into your notes, because what you can do is use it as a driver to learn more about whatever that bullet point is. Okay. Just another little key point when you are kind of breaking down these points. Do bear in mind, revision is not learning. Okay, they are not the same idea. I know you probably think they are, but they're not. Revising is going over it. Okay, I'm revising it. Learning is I'm learning it for the first time, or if I don't understand it, I'm learning it so I understand it. So there is assumption in your notes that you understand it, okay? And if you don't understand something in your notes, then you're not going to learn it, okay? You're not going to remember it. You're not going to be able to answer a question on it. So if there is anything in your notes or any topic you don't understand, you must make that a priority to actually ensure you do understand it before you can then revise it, okay? Just because I get quite a few questions about the FD cycle, especially double fetches and jump commands, just want to kind of use this as another example. So again, remember that when we are talking about the FD cycle and jump commands in your notes, these are going to be very condensed. They're going to be keyword rich, but they're not there to help you understand it. Okay, so if you don't understand how and why this works the way it does, you must make sure you find out first before actually trying to revise this topic. Okay, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to try and regurgitate something, and a lot of the time you have to apply your knowledge to a scenario, and therefore when you apply that knowledge, it's going to come out tumbled, it's going to come out incoherent, and you're just going to kind of brains splurge on paper, and what happens is you will miss marks. So understanding is important. Anyway, notice that when I'm talking about this, I'm using the words address, opcode, decoded. I'm using the correct registers. I'm talking about fetching. So it's important that you are using the keywords in your notes as well as actually when you are writing your exam answers out. If you don't have keywords in your notes, you won't write them in your exam answers either. Therefore, you will lose marks. Okay, so make sure your your notes are keyword rich. So just another tip, we have got a limited amount of time, so there's no way you can overhaul every single part of your notes. So prioritize that time, okay? Focusing in on the topics you know you struggle with the most, okay? Those are the ones you want to spend time on. However, how can we make ourselves work smarter on that one? Well, why don't you ask Bright Spark in year 12 to have a look at their version of the notes, okay? Use them as a template, have a look, get inspiration from them, okay? And use that as a template. Obviously, still do it yourself because you need that thinking into it, but it's absolutely okay to get inspiration from someone else. There might be some topics that you find super easy though, and you might find, I find paging so easy, and but I haven't got any flashcards on it yet. Or I better make some, just in case Ms. Hamlet asks for it. No, not really, not necessarily. That is something that you could potentially just borrow notes from someone else and just use them as your own. The easy topics you don't have to just redo all yourself. So it's absolutely okay to borrow and share notes and flashcards with one another. Just don't do it for the harder topics. Do make sure you work on it yourself. And do make sure you still critique it and make sure that you are comfortable using it as your revision notes, because obviously if it's subpar, then your revision is going to be subpar as well. Just because someone else has done it for you doesn't mean it's good. We're almost there, ladies and gents. Sorry, it's a long one. The last thing about revision is, especially at this stage, how do you know what you don't know? Okay. Revision needs to be focusing in on the topics you struggle with the most. It needs to be focusing on the information you have forgotten. Now, how can you know what you've forgotten until you test yourself? And this becomes the most important part of revision. Now, we've said this more than once, okay? And I can't stress how important this is, but you must test yourself as you go along. Please do not just rely on exam practice for this one, because actually the fastest way to do it is active recall. You have your flashcard, you have your questions on the back of the flashcard. It takes 30 seconds to test yourself on that one. If you're getting it wrong, well, straight away, you know that's a topic you need to revise. If you do an exam question on it and then use that as the driver to see if you know the knowledge or not, that's probably going to take you 10 minutes. Realistically, you sit down, you get your exam paper out, you do the exam question, you get the mark scheme out, you check the answers. Oh, I made a mistake on this topic. Well, that's the time it's taken you to know you don't know the information. Active recall is quick for checking quickly. Do you know it or not? Okay, so that's why I really I think active recall is so important. Obviously, there's two aspects to exams. Okay, one is the knowledge you need. The other is the application of the knowledge to answer exam questions. Active recall does not help you with that exam technique, so you do have to do exam questions to help practice, to make sure you know that. And it might be it's not the knowledge you are unsure about, but actually how do you answer and approach exam questions. That's a very different issue, obviously, but knowing that that's the issue and knowing that, well, I know the knowledge, but it's actually exam questions I struggle with, okay, well, that gives you something to work with, doesn't it? Okay, so when you are revising, my tip to you is use active recall first, then do exam questions. Don't just do exam questions only. And once you've done it, decide with yourself whether you're going to move this topic to green. Say, okay, this topic I'm confident with. I don't have to revise this multiple times again. Maybe I'll have a quick refresh before the exam and that's it. Whilst your amber and red ones, the ones you struggle with, those are ones I need to really, really focus in on and go over it more than once before the assessment happens. Okay. You can use the active recall in lots of different ways. You can use flashcards. You can ask your mates to test you. You can do a brain dump onto paper. You can use your own questions or write your own questions. There's a million one techniques you can use for that one. But I advise you use it to help you understand, is this a knowledge issue that you have, or is it an exam technique issue that you have? Okay. And the last thing I will say is especially for your describe style questions and your long answer questions. You need to know what good answer looks like. So when you do an exam question and you're checking your own answers to see if you get the marks or not, how do you know that that is actually really good? Because if you don't know what a good answer looks like for a topic, then how on earth can you reproduce it in the exam as well? So keywords and the mark schemes are really important for that one, and also checking in with your peers, saying, "Oh, mate, could you just check over this one for me, please? What mark would you give it? Here's the mark scheme." It's a 2-second job, isn't it? Or come and find me and say, "Oh, sir, could you check my FDE answer on this question, please?" Or "I've normalized this table. Could you just check it for me?" That's absolutely okay as well. Okay, so hopefully there's been a few tips on this one. What I want you to do for now is just keep revising. Okay, this was literally just to give you some tips before the exam, and I apologize, it's a 25-minute video.